distance in the light, vibration of a thunder.
Hello, loved ones. This is Matt Stevens, and this is my Sober Addiction, where we are happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. So I hear, hey, Matt, you got all this talk about reality, and that's cool and all, nature of reality and science of consciousness, things like that. And all that's cool and all. But what's it got to do with addiction? To which I answer, well, nothing. And then again, everything. It really just kind of depends upon where you are, I suppose. This podcast is more geared towards people who are already sober and are then moving on with their lives after addiction. Now, I realize that I do have some people listening who are family members of an addict, and I really haven't heard of too many people in active addiction listening to this, but it's possible, I suppose. They are more likely, if at all, they're more likely going to be people who are nearing the end anyway, who are probably wanting to get sober. But then again, on that note, and that's part of, actually, I might have to skip ahead in my outline here because that's one of the things that I talk about, that I was going to be talking about, is how so many of us, while we were in active addiction, wanted to get sober for a long time, right? It didn't take long for addiction to take hold. And it certainly didn't take very long after that for the fun to be gone from using drugs or whatever it was. I mean, if we were covering up emotional trauma or some kind of abuse or whatever, a lot of times it got to the point where the addiction was worse than what we were covering up, I guess. Or it exacerbated it, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It made things worse. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put a period on the end of that right there because it is towards the end of my outline for this episode. So anyway, getting back to what's all this woo-woo stuff and all this reality creation or science of consciousness or whatever you always talking about, what's that got to do with addiction? And I'm like, well, nothing. And then again, everything. Because it's like, are you, dear loved one, are you the same person you were before addiction? I would guess no. Yeah, I guess that might have been a little bit of a hypothetical or a loaded question. But are you the same person you were before addiction? And I guess I'm going to go a little bit further and say, are you the same person you were during addiction? And again, the answer is no. One thing we do know is that while addiction does not define who we are, it certainly doesn't define who I am today. It did shape who I am because I can speculate on what would have happened in my life had I not ever found drugs, but that's not really even relevant, I suppose. And I guess a little backstory for anyone who doesn't know, I was a late bloomer to the game, meaning I was in rehab with a lot of guys who were in their 20s, and here I am like 40, right? And I'm turning 50 here in a few months. As of recording this, it is August 21st, 2024. Wednesday, I will be releasing this episode on Sunday this weekend. But anyway, I was a late bloomer to the game. Please understand, I did do a little bit of drugs and stuff during my early 20s. Back when I was a bachelor and partying and stuff back in the 90s. So might have gotten a hold of a Percocet or a Tylenol 3. And I realized drugs have gotten a whole lot worse now. But it doesn't take much to get it started. But anyway, in my early 20s, yeah, I use a little bit here and there once in a great while. And I even had a hernia surgery, and which got me a prescription for Percocet. And where that might have started it, I guess, in a lot of people's cases, it did not in mine. Did I abuse that prescription a little bit? All right, I'll admit it. I probably did. That didn't begin my addiction. I didn't actually begin using until my early 30s, somewhere between 30 and 32. I'm not going to get into the whole why. Yes, I was covering up something that was very painful that was going on in my life, and it was my escape. And boy, was it ever. I mean, and it was great, right? That's how it goes. I mean, in the beginning, drugs are fantastic. They are everything you ever needed it to be. They cover up the pain. They make you feel good. They blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't take long. You know, I remember when I started out with, during the whole pill mill thing in Florida, and oxycodone, 30 milligrams and 15 milligrams were a big deal. So I started out that way. I was using a little bit here and there. Of course, like once or twice a week turned into more and more and more. And I remember one day I had this really weird butterflies feeling in my stomach, or very anxious type of feeling. And I asked one of my friends, let's put that in air quotes there, friend. He informed me, you're dope sick. I'm like, what do you mean I'm dope sick? I'm not sick. I just feel anxious. I got this butterfly feeling. It's just, I can't shake it. He's like, yeah, that's the beginning of it. That's how it starts. You're dope sick. I'm sorry to tell you, but you're addicted. Well, of course I was in denial. I was like, no, that's not it. And I let it go and whatever. And I guess I most likely used some drugs and, got over it and whatever. But it eventually turned into full-blown addiction. And then eventually it got too expensive. And eventually I found heroin, and you know how that goes. Starts out with a little bit here and there, a little dibble dabble. And next thing you know, you're banging freaking 2 grams a day. That's how it goes. But anyway, how my life would have went had I never discovered opioids, I don't know. It's and in some cases, I think, do I even want to know? Because the thing that I was covering up was really, really painful. But then again, maybe it would have gotten me out of that situation sooner because I was not using drugs to cover it up and basically not give a damn about what was going on because I was high and I didn't care, right? I mean, that's how it always goes. Whenever things aren't going our way, when we're in active addiction, we just use and get high and whatever. Watch the world burn down. And that's why when we do get sober, we have to learn to cope with things. It's like they say with the emotional maturity. Like if someone were to begin, just hypothetically, if someone were to begin using drugs at the age of 20, and every time something didn't go their way, they got high instead of dealing with it, then let's say they stop using drugs at the age of 40, well, they, for 20 years, never dealt with anything. They never faced a issue head on and got through it. So they didn't mature emotionally. Basically, their maturing cut off at the age they began using. So now they're 40 years old with the maturity level of a 20-year-old. Because for 20 years, they never dealt with anything. They never faced things and got through it. So now they've got a couple of things working against them. One, they've got the maturity level of a 20-year-old. Plus, they've got 20 years worth of emotional baggage to get through, by the way, with the maturity level of a 20-year-old. So when we see people who are new to sobriety and they are coping with things, we really need to be there for them. Because we don't want them to say, oh, hell, what's the use? It's too late, and relapse. This is when we've really got a chance to bring people back to the good side. We've got a chance to bring people back to the light. And they've got a lot of things they got to deal with. But they've also got, like I say, the upside to this whole thing is they've got an incredible amount of momentum built in their life. Because a lot of times they are way down the spiral. They are way down there. And then when they come firing up out of rock bottom at warp speed, that is an incredible amount of momentum for their life. That's the type of momentum that a lot of people in business strive to build. You see a lot of business owners, they're like, we got to get some momentum up. What they mean is they got to get their sales going, for example. But somebody getting sober has instant momentum. And that's why I say ride that wave. Don't just kind of get there, get sober and be like, whew, okay, I made it. I made it to sobriety. Sure, celebrate, be happy. That's an enormous freaking accomplishment. But don't stop. Continue. Because, like I say, you have an immense amount of momentum going for you. It's actually something that a lot of people would envy. Anyway, so dealing with the emotional maturity, that's an issue. It's not something that can't be overcome. But that's where those of us who love an addict and are supporting their sobriety, supporting their recovery, we need to try to be understanding and understand this person has never dealt with things or hasn't dealt with things in a lot of years or however long. So I need to be patient and be there for this person and support them and understand they may be a little bit emotionally immature. Okay. It's nothing we can't get over though, right? I mean, I found drugs, we'll say at the age of 30. I got sober first time at about age 40. And I got sober once and for all, for real, at 42, whatever it was. I'm not, you think, I should know. I could do the math. I mean, I know that much. So that's where that is. So I basically lost, I don't know, anywhere from 11 to 13 years of emotional maturity. Have I caught back up to it? I like to think I have. Yeah, I've caught back up to it. I'm turning 50 here in a little bit, here in a few months. And do I think I'm the emotional maturity level of a 50-year-old? I'm pretty close. Close enough, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's not really for me to judge. And that's not really what's important. Especially not to the point I'm making anyway. Getting back to what started this whole little rant. Am I the same person I was before addiction? Absolutely not. Am I the same person I was during addiction? Absolutely not. While addiction does not define me, it doesn't. It's not who or what I am. I am an addict in recovery, yes. And that is part of my history. And I'm actually proud to say that. And thankfully, I've had a lot of people around me who are supportive of that. I've had people who, like I was at work one time, and I don't know how it came up, but I was talking to a couple of people in the HR department, and somehow or other it came up that I was an addict in recovery, and I told them. And they were very supportive, and they were like, well, that's awesome. Congratulations. And I think at that time, it has probably been, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I can't remember exactly, but I'd been 4 or 5 years sober. I believe 5 at the time, actually. And they were like, wow, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's a big deal. And, so I am proud of the fact that I am an addict in recovery. I don't go around and put it on blast around my family because I know that was a very hard time in their lives. It was a hard time in my life too. Of course, it was self-imposed, but whatever. But, I'm not going to put it on blast around my family, mom, dad, and all that, because it was a very hard time in their lives. And I'm not going to put it in their faces that I'm proud of the fact that I am an addict in recovery. I'm not proud of that addict part, I guess. Well, my mom has told me how proud of me she is that I was able to kick heroin and keep it that way. And that means a lot. That means a whole lot coming from mom and dad and, everybody. My kids, now the lovely Kitty, and she's had to deal with it in her own family. I met Kitty long after the fact. But of course, that's something else I've talked about. I couldn't have a relationship of this caliber, I guess, in active addiction. It just wouldn't happen. First of all, she would never put up with that, nor should she. Anyway, that's another subject. I think it is about time I bring Kitty back on the podcast, though, isn't it? That was a really popular episode. In fact, I think it may be the most downloaded. It is. It is the most downloaded episode I've got. So maybe I just need to Bring her on and just bring her on every one of them, huh? So I say addiction does not define me, but it does play a role in what I've become. Because that time in our lives taught us a lot of things. It taught us a lot. It taught us a lot about habits. It taught me in particular, and I'm sure I'm not special here, taught a lot about spirituality and things. And then the other things I talk about when I talk about reality creation and the nature of reality and science of consciousness, when it comes to feedback loops and breaking patterns. Thank you, Archaics. I have to say it because that's where I get the feedback loops and the breaking patterns from. I give credit where it's due. So feedback loops, it's every day is, well, just like the Nine Inch Nails song, every day is exactly the same. And in order to stop that madness, that every single day is exactly the same, we have to break our patterns. We have to do something different because the reality that we're in, the realm, and here we go, I'm going there. Oh, Matt's going there. Well, hey, at least I made it a pretty good while into the podcast before I even mentioned the word construct or simulation. All right, fine, I'll stop. So your reality keeps reflecting back to you what you broadcast out into it. And if we keep broadcasting the same old thing, chasing drugs, I'm dope sick, I'm chasing drugs, I'm dope sick, I'm chasing drugs, I'm getting high, I feel better, next day, same damn thing. Next day, same damn thing. Every day, same thing. It's insanity, right? And the only way to fix that is to begin broadcasting out into the field it's like this is not it. This feedback loop that I'm repeating every single day. This ain't it, man. Something's got to change. So we have to declare what it is that we want to do with ourselves instead of this. Broadcast that out into the field and then break pattern. Do something different. Turn left instead of right. You can turn left and go to see the dope man, or you can turn right and go to a meeting, or even better, go to rehab if in that case, but whatever. There's all kinds of resources. There's all kinds of help out there. The only thing is people don't do it. They intend, I'll do it tomorrow or next week or whenever. Always waiting for the perfect time. And one thing that we know is there's never a perfect time to do anything. There's never going to be a perfect time to have a kid, but yet we have kids. And when we do have them, it's perfect. Or at least they're perfect, right? A lot of things that we've learned from our time in active addiction is, like I said, habits, feedback loop, which is pretty much the same thing because our habit dictates our feedback loop, which dictates our habits, so there you go. And we have to consciously change that. Or you can keep going and eventually you're going to get picked up by the police and spend some time in jail and then it'll be changed for you. Then you'll just sit there angry and say, man, when I get out of here, I'm going to get so high. So it's much better to do it on our own terms, right? I'm sure that's not hard to agree with. But we have to consciously do it. Decide this is not it. Where do I get off this thing? Well, first thing you got to do is decide what you are going to do. Decide this is not me. Well, okay, fine. That's great. Really, that is. But what is you? What are you? Well, I am sober. Great. Such as my mantra. I'm happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. Of course, you got to get a little bit more specific than that, but that's a great start because when you're in active addiction, you certainly aren't happy or healthy. And I'd be absolutely shocked if you were wealthy, and you certainly aren't free because you're a slave to the dope. So, happy, healthy, wealthy, free. Pretty good start. Of course, on an individual basis, you got to be a little more specific. So, there's that. We have to be very specific and state what it is that we are going to do now. I am sober. And then what are you going to do after that? Are you going to go check into rehab? That would be a pretty big pattern break, and it would be you stepping in. It would serve two purposes. It would be you having a pattern break. Rather than go to see the dope man, you're going to check into rehab. And two, it's you stepping in the direction of this new reality that you have decided is your new reality, this new creation. And if you're one of the people who listens to this podcast and you're not the actual addict, but you're the loved one of somebody, this applies to everything. I'm only kind of going here because I have had the question posed to me. Hey, Matt, I thought your podcast was about addiction. You talk an awful lot about reality creation and the nature of reality and science of consciousness and all that stuff, because it's all relative. One thing we learned from addiction is that decisions and actions today dictate what we will be tomorrow. Hence the setting of the intention, then broadcasting it to the field, then following it up with a pattern break and some action in that you moving in that direction. You have to begin moving in the direction of whatever it is you are manifesting for your life. You do need to set the intention, yes. You do need to vibrate on that frequency, yes. And you do need to broadcast it to the field that this is what you are now, so that things will begin moving around, so that your higher power can begin rearranging things in your life to coincide with what you are doing with your life now. And begin, most important part, begin moving in that direction. In the case of someone getting sober, they need to go to rehab. That's all there is to it. I'm sorry. Or I guess they could go to a clinic and get on maintenance medicines. That's fine too. There's no judgment here. I tell people all the time, if maintenance meds is part of your sobriety, if that's part of your recovery process, do it. And if you go to meetings, and I'm not going to mention the groups by name, but if you go to meetings where people kind of poo-poo that, then just keep it to yourself. It's none of their damn business anyway what meds you're on. Nobody cares if you're on blood pressure medicine, do they? Well, then they don't need to worry about whether or not you're on maintenance meds for addiction. It's none of their business. That's that. I'm not going to get into that again. But like I said, intention is not enough. We have to break pattern and get into physical action and do it. Anyway, there's that, loved ones. This life, this incarnation that we are in currently is very short on a cosmic scale. But the lessons that we learn are huge. In fact, I've often referred to this particular lifetime as a crash course, as having a quickening effect on your evolution of self, your spiritual evolution. Things are happening a lot faster these days than in previous times. And I know everybody thinks they're living in the end days and all that good stuff. I don't think that, but I do believe that we are on the verge of something spiritually. I do believe this may be our last time here, or at least in this capacity. And we did need the spiritual kick in the ass that this lifetime has given us so that we can be prepared for what's coming next. One thing that we have learned is that we can go from rock bottom, strung out on dope, to being poster child for sobriety, being the poster child for recovery. We can go from that to operating an online business, or as the example I've been using a lot lately, being a professional poet. We can go from that to this. Anything is possible. It really, truly is. Anything is possible. Once we choose that this is what I want to be, because want implies that we don't have it. Never want to be anything. You either are or you are not, and that's it. So choose what we want to be and then broadcast it to the universe. Hey, this is universe. This is what I am now. Because remember, the universe is a neutral field. It does not care. Or you can call it the construct or the simulacrum. Thank you, Archaics, one more time. Our simulacrum is a Latin word that just means it's a copy of something. It's actually a very ancient word. But anything is possible. So we choose what we want to broadcast. And whatever we broadcast out, remember, the universe is neutral. It does not care. You can broadcast good, bad, or otherwise. Whatever you broadcast out will be reflected back to you because it is holographic. The mirror principle absolutely applies. Well, of course, there's always the whole getting into action. You've got to put some skin in the game. We have to broadcast what it is that we are becoming and then start doing it. Because it is just a state of being. Once we begin to be something, well, what do you know? That's what we are. I think in a recent YouTube video, I kind of had a little one-off. And I said, even if you were a professional poet, and you're like, hey, Matt, you got guess what? I'm not a professional poet because because a professional makes money doing it. And while I am a poet and while I am posting my work online or whatever, and Substack, whatever, I'm still working at Walmart. I'm like, well, yes, but now you're a professional poet who works at Walmart currently. But nonetheless, you are a professional poet and you're doing what professional poets do, which is write poetry, and put it somewhere where it's out there to the public or to a publisher or whatever. But if you're currently working at Walmart or wherever, that's something else. That does not define you. You define you. You're the professional poet? Great. You're working at Walmart? That's fine too. That's all. That is all, loved ones. So, yes, I have been posting little one-off videos on YouTube. They're usually less than 10 minutes. It's usually just a thought that I've had a lot of times when I'm writing something or maybe editing one of these podcasts or whatever. And I'm like, oh, man, I really wish I'd said this. So anyway, there's those. And I would appreciate it if you would go to the YouTube, Matt Stevens, MSA, as in my sober addiction. And please subscribe to the channel. Much appreciated. Also on my Substack, just under Matt Stevens. I would appreciate it if you would do that as well and give me a rating and or review wherever you get your audio podcasts. That would also be much appreciated. So no, I'm not making apologies for sometimes deviating away from addiction because we're so much more than just that. That's not who we are. It's helped to shape us who we are now, I suppose, maybe, but we're moving on. We're moving on from addiction. No, from active addiction, right? We need to understand we have not necessarily a responsibility, but we're in a position where we can be inspirations to other addicts who are either new to sobriety, new to recovery, or are wanting to get sober. Of course, that's pretty much everybody who's in active addiction wants to get sober. Only difference is they haven't done it yet. Well, it's not that simple. Yes, it is. And don't you tell me it's not because I've been there. The only difference between Matt that wanted to get sober and Matt that did get sober was Matt went and got sober. Those are the only difference between those two different people, those two different versions of me. All right, loved ones, I am going to go. Remember, we are happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. I love you, and I will be back directly.
There is a distance in the light.